I just feel like I've been doing a lot of classroom pragmatics and talking about how we sort of, figure out what the heck we're supposed to do in these classrooms. Um, but to my surprise, this is kind of what my dissertation was about long, long, long ago. I honestly just never thought it was going to pop back up. Um, so just a little bit of intro to myself. I'm going to go back over here. I'm not going to read to you, but essentially that's a little bio on how I got on the path I did. I've been teaching since 2003. And even before I finished the PhD program, I'd already decided I felt the most useful at a community college. So I kind of already knew that what I was doing, I wasn't planning on, you know, um, publishing anything, but nonetheless, I absolutely love what I was writing. Bluntly speaking, I was kind of pushed into sort of race rhetoric and all of that. So it merged, but my true love is science fiction. It always has, ever since I was a little kid. So what I wanted to do in the talk today was kind of talk about what built up my studies and just some quirky stuff that I ran across during those studies, during those years of abject graduate student poverty, and the thoughts on how it informs what I do today. So I actually already this morning in a different session talked about kind of what I do in the classroom somewhat briefly. And if you are interested in any of that, please feel free to contact me anytime. In fact, as you can see, I kind of really enjoy doing course websites. So I'll drop the site here because it's just a website. It's Weebly, as you can see in the corner. It's free. Uh, but what I've noticed nowadays is this is just a random. This is course a course at Harvard by Professor Sutherland about writing the body in the post-human age. Um, so really quick, I remember trying to figure out what's the difference between post-human and transhuman. To be frank, it's blurred all the time. But to make things simple, post-humanism is kind of the way I wanted to approach thinking about AI in general, which is just that kind of frame of how is this changing us? Like our definition of who we are as human beings. Like now, a lot of people are going to say, not at all. We are who we are. Um, however, as as a scholar who likes to make big things out of little things, I really want to explore and watch out and observe. We talk a lot about how AI is making us, not just AI, but technology in general, is shortening our attention span, is making students more anxious, making them more entitled. Not sure how they fit together, but making them intellectually lazier or incompetent or unable to, sort of negotiate the complexity of living life. I mean, sure, but I think that, back in the day, Aristotle feared that, writing would do that to us. And I'm pretty sure with the birth of the TV, we all thought that our brains were going to rot. So, this sort of anxiety of who we're going to become, how we're going to change, but, you know, obviously counterbalanced with the fact that there are some things that never change. One of them, bluntly, being I know that there was a lot of worry in the beginning of will AI eliminate our jobs? And yeah, no, I mean, I could be dead wrong, but I don't think in the least we're even close to losing our jobs. I just think with myself, if I were to go back to school, would I want to have an AI professor? Um, no matter how quote unquote infallible they may seem. Now, in our other session, we definitely went over how fallible AI is as of yet. However, I do think that that's something that just can't change, but I could be wrong. And I bring that up because I kind of want to explore the extreme end of what AI has been opening doors to, like the post-humanism movement, where it's all about transhumanism. So I forgot to add was this idea of how we can use technology to enhance who we are, like literally our bodies and our brains and our, the way we function. Here it's done in art form, since art always does seem to reflect who we are deep down. However, here we have and this was a long time ago. I'm pretty sure that Neil Harbison, he did this in 2004. He had an antenna implanted in his skull that allows him to perceive colors because he is born with color blindness. And so it was literally implanted in his brain. So I know that we have Neuralink lately, but we've been doing this and thinking about this for a long time, right? Prosthetics. Uh, I did not look into Liz Parrish. She claims that she did dual gene therapy to eliminate the aging genes. Yeah, if someone knows about that, feel free to let me know. So then, of course, we come to today, right? We've got Elon Musk's Neuralink, which, quite frankly, worries me just because Musk has not been proven to be the most um, data-driven safety person. And yet we are embedding these chips into our brains. And when I first heard of this, I was like, this is dumb. But then, of course, I hear about the possibilities that Neuralink has. So we're still, tech is in baby form right now, and we're kind of watching our toddler and seeing how it's going to grow. And it's pretty wobbly. But on the other hand, right, there's so much room for drastic changes in our human population. I mean, we can already say that with, drastically different mortality rates for babies and moms. We can say that for drastically less diseases that are not, eliminating as much of the population anymore. And so technology clearly does have this giant impact on who we are as a whole. Um, if not, the finer things. Like, I don't know if we're going to stop being insecure or happy or sad or, all of these very, very simple things that we feel every day. But all of that sort of gets packaged into what we call humanity, which I think is fascinating. So, since my first love is literature, this presentation is going to be heavily, heavily influenced by literature. And when I say literature, I mean like movies and books and TV shows and anime. I just can't help but crank up that little filter and drive my son and my husband crazy with every movie I watch, anything I see. And since it's all nowadays, the tech is everywhere, whether you want to see it or not, it's everywhere. So, as we go through, do see how many of these that you can spot, right? What is the movie here? This one is actually from Ex Machina, which is ironic since I didn't like the movie at all. I know a lot of people love this movie, but I think it had its problems. However, it does not change the fact that the ideas explored is pretty much right up my alley that I kind of wanted to talk about and touch on today. Um, so let's see. Oh, I just see Alex mentions, imagine being born with a disability and needing to pay a subscription, right? Yeah, that's precisely why tech in the hands of certain people makes me very nervous. And that's a whole other conversation to have, which I would love to have. Um, for now, I thought I would go backwards a little bit and take a look at how long we have as a society been thinking about this. So we have Alan Turing back in 1936 talking about the Turing test. And it's this test, right? Most of you guys are probably familiar with him asserting that when are we going to get to the point where we can't tell the difference between human behavior and machine behavior. And the test is, um, artificial intelligence is that point where we can't tell the difference. And so, we're there. Clearly, we were getting there back in the 1930s, right? Of course, how many times do you ever wonder when you're on the phone, or especially when you're doing the chat, right? Customer service chat, like, am I talking to? I mean, they said they're a person, but I don't know. They sure sound like a bot. So, um, you know, how do we feel about that? How is that changing the way we approach customer service? Um, this is yet another one of my absolute favorite movies, Iron Giant. Um, so that we graduate from, and I'm doing a little bit of a skip here, but then we've got Hans Moravec. He's a bit more contemporary to us, but he introduced this idea of, and he wasn't the first one, but he's the one who has lately popularized this idea of, what if we upload our entire consciousness? So if we can create an algorithm that can match neuron for neuron, our brain functions, into a computer, then we could viably upload the human brain and exist in the virtual world. Now, I thought when I first heard this, 2 decades ago, I was like, that's dumb. I don't want to live in a computer. It would be so claustrophobic. I think I would lose my mind. Right. But then, of course, now I understand a little better, like the idea of having a robot. So for someone who's a quadriplegic, this would be absolutely life-changing, right? If we could, and we talk about robots still, but I do have a background in biology, and so I can't help but always remember that when we're talking about robots in the future, I really don't think they're going to be metallic. I think that we will home grow. We already have the capability of lab growing a body. Now, maybe not a full body yet, but like I said, all of this that we consider nascent and possibly not possible, I generally, from my studies and reading and what so have you, a lot of this I do believe will be possible, right? And I know that sounds scary, but rather than uh, fearing, right, what's coming down the pike, I find it interesting to think about how do we handle that? How do we approach it? Because if we just say one way or the other, it's very unrealistic. It's not going to go great. It's not going to go apocalyptically bad, in my opinion, right? I guess I am an optimist. But let's not get away from reality, right? There's always going to be counterbalances. So he recently did publish a new book, Robot Mirror Machine to Transcendent Mind. I thought the reviews were hilarious. We've got the sci-fi, father saying, "Robot is the most awesome work of controlled imagination I have ever encountered. Hans Moravec stretched my mind until it hit the stops." Yeah. Then we've got Colin McGinn saying, Moravec writes bizarre, confused, incomprehensible things about consciousness as an abstraction. He loses his grip on the distinction between virtual and real reality as his speculations spiral majestically into incoherence. Um, I sometimes felt like this about general academic language, especially when we were hitting something called critical theory. But again, it's different direction. I mean, it's all in the same package. I tend to think that um, having a science background and a humanities background, the distinction between those things are very, very blurred for me. It tends to always be affecting both at the same time. So um, technical academic writing, that's definitely something that I find to be problematic. I know, coming from someone with training in that type of writing, I tell my students every day, don't descend into academic non-speak. Say it like you see it, and clarity is the most powerful language. So again, the best language I like to use is literature. And the reason why that I was attracted to literature, let me back up. The reason why I hated English class in college was that I thought English classes was the class where everyone got an A subjectively, whoever knew how to BS the best. And I was like, what is going on? I mean, I was a science major. I was like, what are they talking about? This is so dumb. I can't stand it. Um, that didn't change the fact that I loved reading books since I was, I don't know, 8, 9, 10. That was, I guess, my TikTok. Um, but I just found talking about the books very strange and not concrete. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole story about how I eventually got to actually having a PhD in English, but um, the one thing that clarified to me while I was working on it was, why do I love literature? And I love it because it's not just stories. I found literature to be my guide. My parents were immigrants. And so literature was sort of that door that opened up to me and facilitated my ability to switch schools again and again and again, because my dad always pulled me out of school and moved. He was kind of a nomad. um, but also gave me the mobility that my parents always feared that I wouldn't have. I remember I said, well, I want to be a lawyer. My parents like, you can't be a lawyer. You're a Korean girl. And I mean, even then, as a young girl, I was like, what? What are you talking about? They're like, well, they were implying you don't have the linguistic facility. And I was like, what? This is my first language. I'll do fine, mom and dad. Um, and it was hard for them to embrace that, but literature definitely probably helped that a lot. Right. So literature kind of informs me on then how to practice these sort of the way I teach. So another thing that informs, because I love it so much, is cyberpunk sci-fi, birthed by William Gibson. There's also the very controversial Donna Haraway, the feminist, uh, her cyborg manifesto, which really idealizes. I mean, I based a lot of my dissertation on her because I was starry-eyed and young, and I was like, oh, this is so amazing. She talks about how sci-fi will just erase all boundaries and we'll just all coalesce and love each other because we're all of the same organic mass. Uh, I'm not there anymore, but actually, that's a little bit of a fib because I am still there, because I do believe in how all of us collectively, right here in this session, we're all devoted to participating in society, and we're all devoted to asking ourselves, what is technology as a part of what I'm trying to get done here, right? Um, Hopefully, we can keep in mind constantly that we have a mission, we have a purpose, we have objectives here, and that there is no way that technology or AI can take that from us. There's just no way. That, I mean, at least that's my argument, right? That's my, and I'll that's the hill I'll stand on. um so there's so much good stuff out here, and it's such a profound reflection of our fears and our hopes in what technology can do for us. Arcane, the latest, I think, super cool, trendy works on Netflix, is a really great, I think, framework to think about how, no matter how far ahead in time we go, we still struggle with those who have and those who have not. And the question is, how can technology play a role in either equalizing that, or for some, eliminating that difference entirely? So uh, I think that I try to remember that. I think it's a pretty explicit. I think my students would tell you that's a very explicit theme that I hit on again and again and again. So I mentioned earlier in the other session how in my classroom I always try to speak to my students in terms of the purpose of why they're taking English. And I always tell them, I'm not here to teach you English because I want you to know what ethos, pathos, and logos is. I want you to know how to use it, right? I want you to participate in society because writing is a form of representing yourself. Writing is a form of asserting your mind. Writing is a form of participating, right? And so if you engage in plagiarizing with AI, you're getting a jump on eliminating yourself from society. You are actively silencing your own voice. And so my hope is that that is what my students can take away in terms of why I'm telling them don't use AI. Please don't use AI in other ways. I do have them use AI, but not as your voice, right? So here's some other seminal pieces, cultural pieces that help shape my ideas. And of course, eventually informed me on where are we going? Like, what do we have to expect in the future, right? So, Philip K. Dick's novel "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep" is the basis for Blade Runner. I would say the differences are pretty vast in some ways, but overall, there is that anxiety. And if you've seen Terminator, it's the same sort of anxiety of, um, in fact, if anything, I would say Androids and Blade Runner approaches it with far more nuance, is this anxiety of how much can artificial intelligence mimic life and how valuable is that, right? How valuable is artificial intelligence sentience? And is it something that will destroy us like Skynet? Or is it something that we will try to subjugate and never give it the sort of existential value that it may eventually attain? I'm not sure, right? Um, here's some more. So notice I only put years, right? Otherwise it's a big quiz. Hopefully some of you guys will recognize who this guy is. Um, it was probably my first exposure to a cyborg, the $6 million man. Um, then as so this is when I was a little kid, and then I grew up into a teenager, and I got totally into. Actually, I wasn't even a teenager. I think I found this one had to have been college. Yeah, I mean, I was in college in the 90s. Um, and this is called Ghost in the Shell. It does that same exploration. So there's always this tension between the how much we embrace AI, how much we embrace technology, and how much we include it into our own bodies, but then how much we sense that that's separate from us or defining who we are. I think it goes with what I'm assuming. Those of you listening to me, some of you are going to decide AI is a form of technology and it's separate. It will never be a part of us. And then there's those of us who are going to be like, this is definitely a part of us. This is, this is where we're headed into sort of cyborgian identities, so to speak. Some people embrace it. Some people are like, no, right? I would love to hear, in a few minutes, your thoughts on that. Again, of course, I'm biased, right, for old school things, but Daniel Keyes's Flowers for Algernon, for me, was really life changing, not only in how I thought about my own intellect, but also in how I taught my students. And this idea of how intelligence can be a very constructed thing and how we glorify it to the point where we forget that intelligence itself is not a virtue, right? Intelligence itself is an ability, but and I think that the later movie Lawnmower Man definitely sort of revisits the exact same theme of what does, and here we're talking about intelligence, and it fits in my paradigm because it was technologically implemented, but I do sort of would love to see us reframe intelligence itself, like the contents of what we call intelligence, as a technology of culture, a technology that we've been using for hundreds of years now, but nonetheless, it's a technology that um, we might, the more we pull back, push back into our early human years and recognize what was a technology back then, I think would do much to inform where we go with the technology we have today, right? Um, I'm not actually sure if I have much to say about Vision from the Marvel. Um, I think they could have fleshed out that a lot more, but that's Marvel for you. um, Here's another great one, Gattaca. This one was all about, I think, technology in the direction that I actually more see future AI being implemented, is this idea of uh, us intermixing it with biology, right? Biology, as in DNA and tissue samples, and, you know, as opposed to that being always separate from metal things, right? So when we think tech, we tend to think of metal stuff. But in actuality, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I worked in a biotech company. One of the projects that was being worked on there was creating a sort of a nano needle. So a needle so thin that it just had a chain of proteins that dragged on top of the DNA to give us a topology. Because at that point, way back then, we had no actual record of 3D structure, the 3D shape, the feel, the cracks and the crevices of DNA, right? So, and yet, in a project like that, it definitely, we can see how technology and biology merges to a point where it's almost indistinguishable, right? These are my one and only AI produced stock images, and it's from the prompt. I asked AI, how does AI envision itself, right? Where, what kind of role do you think you're playing in my society? Now, let's never forget that AI is determined by an algorithm that was designed by a computer scientist. Whoever decided to create the algorithm, this I did this one off of Copilot, right? And I thought it was really fascinating that when I asked, who is AI as a benevolent helper? This is the picture I got, right? Who is AI as an omniscient observer? This is the picture I got, right? They both look pretty, this one especially very Avatar, the last Airbender kind of look. Then I said, who is AI as a rebellious creation? Now I was picturing something far more like Skynet, but fascinatingly, this little pixie girl is what AI gave me. I'm like, that does not look like a rebellious creation to me whatsoever, right? We've got self-aware sentient again. Wow, amazing, fancy, fancy. Then we've got emotional companion in the middle of a very diverse group of people, right? We've got dystopian controller. Actually, there's this one extra picture. I think it's that one because this is the dystopian controller. Then I asked, what does AI look like as an existential threat? Now, me just saying that makes me feel a little anxious, right? And this is the picture that AI gave me. I'm not here to take over, and this cute little chubby little robot surrounded by woodland creatures. Um, Absolutely hilarious. I think that these are all, just like literature, great reflections of what's going on in our own psyche, right? This is what's going on in the background of whoever coded the algorithm to generate these kind of images. There's this whole like, let's make sure that the general public does not see AI as a complete threat, or else they're going to shut us down, right? Let's point anything that's, Skynet like HAL 9000 like to this chubby little, robot, right? And then AI as a moral compass. It's like, oh yeah, we can embrace that, right? So there are definitely some very disturbing implications in these images. I thought that it would just be interesting to take a look at that, see what AI had to say about my presentation topic. So there's HAL. If you haven't seen Space Odyssey, um, you don't have to. Again, I know some people are going to be sad, but it was not my favorite movie either. But that also might be because I tried to watch it when I was too young. And I was like, why is there no talking? Why is it so quiet and creepy? So I was, oh, and my little picture of Skynet actually completely, um, what happened? Let me see. There it is. It got shrunk down, I guess because the resolution's so bad. But there's Sky. Well, it's not really Skynet. This is if you guys have watched Terminator. I absolutely adore the movie Terminator just because it. Oh, hang on, technical difficulties. Because it I watched it at a time where I was young and impressionable, and I just thought, wow, this is so crazy. It's so, you know, what am I going to do in the future? How close is this all going to happen? Right? And then when it actually happened, when we actually got AI, I was like, oh my God, it actually happened. Holy smokes. Here's some really great quotes that I really like about AI. We have Ernst Fisher who says, as machines become more and more efficient and perfect, so it will become clear that imperfection is the greatness of man. I freaking love this quote. This is all about, why I try to get my students to go ahead and write me terrible drafts, right? Because the more I told them, do you know what I think when I see an essay full of errors? They're like, disappointment. I was like, no, joy. I feel joy because it screams authentic, right? And so I think that with AI and for us educators, this idea of how do we keep AI from completely sabotaging everything we're trying to do, um, it's become even more obvious in some ways how important it is for us to refocus on the things that will ultimately empower our students, right? Um, so nobody phrases it this way, but I think that artificial intelligence is almost a humanities discipline. I was like, silly man, it's all a humanities discipline. It's really an attempt to understand human intelligence and human cognition. Obviously, I'm biased, but for me, that was like a duh. But I like that, Sebastian Thrun had that to say, right? And then the final one I mentioned in the other session, I felt like it was rather salty, but you know, before we work on artificial intelligence, why not do something about natural stupidity? This was said by Steve Polyak, who he has, I was surprised, a PhD in artificial intelligence. And that makes far more sense when we realize he's a computer scientist. So this is essentially, um, I know this might have been pretty uh, far reaching, maybe abstract, uh, theoretical, but that was actually the purpose of me asking to present today, because I really wanted to open up a space where we can just go there. um, and not only to be able to do it, but to really urge everyone to sort of step back and think about how AI affects us, not just pragmatically or practicably, but spiritually. Um, and for me, at least, that's my fuel for going to work. That's what gets me up in the morning, right? What is my point here? Why am I doing this? What am I getting out of this? Right? What makes my soul feel full at the end of the day, despite all of the frustrations that come with being an educator. um, so I do vaguely recall there was one last part to my presentation. Um, and this is just my contact info, but I did want to close it up with some really, I love stand-up comedians. If any of these guys offends you, I apologize ahead of time. But and in fact, I'm not actually all that familiar with this guy, but I really liked his little bit, so I'd like to close on his little bit. Oh, all right. So with that, I would let. Oh, there's no sound. Was everybody just sitting there watching silence? Oh my goodness. I apologize for that. That is, well, feel free. Thank you. Feel free to go back to that and watch it with the audio. I am a deep believer in the wisdom of stand-up comedians. Um, I always tell my students, I think that they are the geniuses of rhetoric. They've got to read a room like there's no other and focus on persuading their audience to be on board with whatever they're talking about. So I felt like these three guys, they're not just funny guys, but they make very fascinating observations of where we're at. I did want to hear from anyone here on what your thoughts might be, if anyone had some comments. I see Alex. No, I haven't seen Pantheon. Um, I will definitely look into it because, as you can tell from this whole page, I am very much into watching as many sci-fi works as I can possibly get my hands on. Um, it's just my thing, right? So I'm going to leave it on that because I like it. Um, 2 decades ago, we had Reboot. Alex, what do you mean by reboot? It made living in a computer cool, though. Oh, was this like a simulation game? No, I'm not even familiar with Reboot. What is Reboot? Or did I? I am going through right now a very, very not with it. I forget things. I think I could watch a movie I've watched and think I never watched it before. That's where I'm at right now. But I don't recall first CGI TV show. I don't think so. Discover magazine, that I do remember. I loved Discover magazine, um, and I would easily pick one up right now. Um, this whole idea, I wish that when I was a kid, I had learned in school how absolutely creative things like science and engineering were, because the way I was taught was it's just all science. It's the dependable stuff, right? But who knew that it would be so absolute? See, I don't recognize it all. I'll have to check that. I'll have to check that out, Alex. Um, because I think the past, the older stuff we look at, it says the most about where we're at. And let me just say, I feel like pop culture nowadays might be a little less informative, but I don't think it's because we're turning out stupider stuff. I just think that the older stuff becomes, the better we can pick out the good stuff, right? So right now we're just living through it. They're just churning out everything they can to make a buck, and we're consuming it. But it's only after you give it about 10, 15, 20 years can you realize, oh, that was good stuff. That was terrible. Right? At least that's how I do it. um, Edge runners. Ooh, all right. Now I've got more things to watch since I am going to take a medical leave of absence for a little while, starting this Monday. So if anyone's got other recommendations, please feel free to pass them along. Um, I have my course site at the top of this chat, as well as if you go to this page on contact, there is my contact info, my email. I don't recommend calling my office phone. I actually don't even know how to access my voicemail. I just wait for it to transcribe it into my email. So I I highly recommend, if you got Microsoft Teams, that is actually the absolute most efficient way to contact me. I even say that to my students. So I don't know if there's any other professors out there, but I know this is going to sound bad. I tell them, do not email me. Whatever you do, do not email me. Just Teams message me, because all of my students automatically have Teams. And this way, email is 100% administrative, and Teams is where I can actually communicate with people. So there's a free tip right there. But essentially, this is what I have to say for today. And so I guess I can just hopefully await some folks to let me know what your thoughts were. Contact me anytime for a cup of coffee, or just give me a line or a recommendation. I'm going to need recommendations for the next 3 weeks. They say that my recovery time is going to be 4 weeks, but I'm going to try to cut it down to 3. All right, that's it. Thank you very, very much for attending my little session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Song.
Thank you.
Thank you.